Silence commands respect in ways that words often fail to. When someone expects a reaction, particularly an emotional one, and is met with nothing but quiet composure, the dynamic shifts entirely. People are conditioned to expect certain responses: anger when provoked, defensiveness when accused, justification when questioned. But when those expectations are disrupted, something powerful happens. The focus moves away from the reaction and onto the person who initiated the conflict. They are left alone with their own words, forced to confront the weight of their actions without the distraction of an argument. Imagine a situation where someone is deliberately trying to get under your skin. They throw insults, accusations, or passive-aggressive comments your way, expecting you to lash out, to defend yourself, or to fight back. It's a game to them. They are waiting for the moment they can point at you and say, "See, look how they reacted." Your anger would only validate their actions. It would give them permission to continue to feel justified in their behavior. But when you meet their hostility with silence, something unexpected happens. They lose their footing. The energy they were trying to provoke is no longer there to fuel the fire. They are left hanging in the space you created, confronted with nothing but themselves. And that can be an incredibly unsettling experience. People are used to noise. They are used to debates, arguments, shouting matches. The world is loud. Social media, news, conversations, all of it thrives on reactions. But silence is rare. And because it is rare, it is powerful. It forces people to slow down and actually process what just happened. It leaves room for reflection, for self-awareness, and most importantly, for accountability. When you don't react in anger, the other person is left to deal with the full weight of their words without any distractions. They have no choice but to sit with the discomfort of their own behavior, to question why they expected a fight and why they didn't get one. This isn't about passive aggression or manipulation. It's about control, not over others, but over yourself. It's about recognizing that you don't have to engage in every battle someone invites you to. You don't have to match their energy. In fact, by refusing to engage on their terms, you set the terms yourself. You establish a dynamic where they have to reassess how they approach you, where they have to reconsider whether their tactics even work. Think about the leaders, mentors, or figures you respect the most. Chances are they don't waste their energy on pointless arguments. They don't lash out when challenged. Instead, they hold their ground with quiet confidence. They let their silence speak for them, and in doing so, they demand a level of respect that shouting never could. Their presence is enough. And that's because they understand something fundamental: power isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the voice people want to listen to. And silence makes people listen. There's also a psychological aspect to this. When someone is met with silence, they begin to fill in the gaps themselves. They start wondering what you're thinking, how you're feeling, what your next move will be. They begin second-guessing themselves, replaying the interaction in their mind, analyzing every word they said. The uncertainty unsettles them more than any verbal response ever could. With anger, they have something to push against. With silence, they have nothing to hold on to. They are left in a void of their own creation, and in that void, they are forced to confront themselves. And then there's the long-term impact. When you choose silence over anger, you don't just win the moment, you win the narrative. People remember the times they expected a fight but didn't get one. They remember the silence because it's unusual, because it made them uncomfortable in a way they couldn't quite explain. And more often than not, they come back later, sometimes days or even weeks after, with a different perspective. They begin to realize the power of that moment, the lesson embedded in your lack of reaction. This applies to all areas of life: personal relationships, professional settings, leadership, negotiations. The ability to remain composed in the face of provocation is one of the most valuable skills a person can develop. It signals strength, confidence, and emotional intelligence. It tells people that you are not easily manipulated, that you are not at the mercy of your emotions, that you operate on a different level. And in doing so, you set a standard for how you deserve to be treated. Of course, this isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending things don't affect you. It's about choosing when and how to respond. It's about recognizing that not every battle is worth fighting, and that sometimes the most effective response is no response at all. Because silence, when used with intention, is not passive, it is assertive. It is a statement in itself, one that says, "I see what you're trying to do, and I choose not to engage." And that choice is powerful. It shifts the power dynamic entirely. It forces the other person to adjust, to rethink their approach, to question whether their tactics are effective. And in many cases, it leads to a change in behavior. Because when someone realizes that their usual methods of provocation don't work on you, they are left with two options: change their approach or walk away. Either way, you win. There's a reason why some of the most influential people in history have been known for their ability to remain calm under pressure. It's not because they didn't feel anger or frustration. It's because they understood the power of restraint. They understood that a well-placed silence carries more weight than 1,000 words spoken in anger. They knew that true control isn't about overpowering others, it's about mastering yourself. So the next time you're faced with a situation that begs for a reaction, take a moment, pause, breathe, and consider whether silence might serve you better than words ever could. Because in that silence, there is strength. In that silence, there is wisdom. And in that silence, there is a lesson the other person won't soon forget. People expect anger. They expect raised voices, sharp words, and defensive reactions. It's the natural cycle of conflict. One person provokes, the other reacts, and the exchange escalates. But when you break that cycle, when you remove your reaction from the equation, you leave the other person with nothing to feed off. They are left standing in the discomfort of their own words and actions, confronted with their own reflection. And that silence, that is far more unsettling than any outburst could ever be. Anger fuels the fire. It gives people a reason to double down, to justify their actions, to shift the focus onto your reaction instead of their behavior. When you respond in anger, the conversation stops being about what they did and starts being about how you reacted. Suddenly they have a defense. Look how angry you are, they'll say. You're overreacting. And just like that, they escape accountability. But when you meet them with silence, with calm, unwavering composure, they lose that escape route. They are forced to sit with the weight of their own behavior without a distraction to deflect from it. People don't often realize the power of silence until they experience it firsthand. Think about the last time you were in an argument and the other person simply stopped responding. Not out of avoidance, but out of a deliberate decision to disengage. It's unsettling. The mind starts racing, filling in the gaps. Why aren't they reacting? Did I go too far? What are they thinking? The absence of a response speaks louder than any shouted words ever could. It forces reflection, even if the person doesn't admit it in the moment. This is especially true in situations where someone is trying to get a reaction out of you. Maybe it's a colleague who undermines you, a friend who makes passive-aggressive comments, or even a family member who knows exactly what buttons to push. If you respond in anger, you give them exactly what they were looking for, a reaction. But if you hold your ground, if you refuse to let them dictate your emotions, the power shifts entirely. They no longer have control over the situation, and that realization, whether conscious or subconscious, is enough to shake them. This doesn't mean silence is easy. In fact, it can be one of the hardest things to practice. The urge to defend yourself, to prove a point, to push back at strong. But strength isn't always about fighting. Sometimes it's about restraint. It's about knowing that not every battle is worth engaging in, and that the most effective way to win is by refusing to play the game at all. Because when someone is looking for a fight and you don't give it to them, they are left fighting with themselves. There's another layer to this that many people don't consider. Silence isn't just about withholding a reaction, it's about creating space. Space for the other person to process, to reflect, to question themselves. When anger is met with anger, there's no room for thought. It becomes a back and forth exchange, a clash of egos, a contest of who can be louder. But when anger is met with silence, the energy shifts. The person who was expecting a fight is suddenly left with their own words echoing back at them. They have to sit in the silence to feel the weight of what they just said or did. And in that space, something powerful happens: awareness. Many times people don't even realize the full impact of their actions until they are forced to sit with them. If you call someone out in anger, their first instinct is defense. But if you let silence do the work, they have no choice but to confront themselves. And that confrontation is often what leads to real change. Because guilt, shame, and self-awareness don't come from being shouted at, they come from within. They come from those quiet moments where a person is left alone with their own actions, with no distractions, no justifications, no way to escape the truth of what they've done. This isn't about passive aggression or avoidance. It's about choosing your response with intention. It's about understanding that sometimes the most powerful message you can send is the one you don't say out loud. And when you master that, you gain an incredible amount of control, not just over situations, but over yourself. Because the person who remains calm in chaos, the person who refuses to be provoked, The person who can stand firm in their silence, they are the ones who truly hold the power. There's a reason why some of the most influential leaders in history have been known for their ability to remain composed under pressure. They knew that words once spoken in anger cannot be taken back, that the person who loses their temper also loses control. That silence, when used intentionally, is not weakness, it is the ultimate form of strength. But silence is not just about controlling the other person, it's about controlling yourself. When you react in anger, you let someone else dictate your emotions. You hand them the power to control how you feel, how you act, how you respond. But when you remain silent, when you refuse to let them pull you into their chaos, you send a clear message: you do not control me. I control me. And that is a lesson they will not forget, because silence is not empty. It is full of meaning, full of unspoken words, full of power. It forces people to pay attention in ways that shouting never could. It makes them question, reflect, and ultimately reconsider. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, take a breath. Resist the urge to react. Let silence do the work. Because in that silence, you will break them in ways anger never could. People expect reactions. They expect that when they push hard enough, they'll get a response: anger, frustration, or even just defensiveness. That's the pattern they're used to, and they know how to navigate it. But when that expectation is met with silence, something shifts. The usual script they follow no longer works. They are left without the reaction they were counting on, and suddenly they have to face their own actions with nothing to deflect onto. That silence forces them to sit with their words and behavior, often leading to realizations they wouldn't have had if you had simply yelled back. Anger is an easy emotion to provoke. It's human nature to react when we feel attacked, wronged, or disrespected. But anger doesn't solve the problem, it amplifies it. It shifts the focus away from the real issue and onto the reaction itself. The moment you raise your voice, the conversation stops being about what they did and becomes about how you responded. They can now justify their actions by pointing to your anger, saying you're being unreasonable, emotional, or out of control. But silence gives them no such excuse. It leaves them with only themselves to confront. And that confrontation is often far more powerful than anything you could say in the heat of the moment. Think about the times in your life when someone met your frustration with silence. Maybe it was a boss who didn't react when you expected them to, a friend who didn't engage in an argument, or even a parent who simply looked at you instead of raising their voice. That silence carried more weight than words ever could. It forced you to reflect, to question, to feel the weight of your own behavior. It wasn't a form of avoidance, it was a form of control. It shifted the dynamic and made you think in ways that shouting never would have. Silence is not passive, it is not weakness. It is intentional, deliberate, and strategic. When used correctly, it commands more respect than any loud outburst ever could. People associate power with control, and the person who can remain composed when others expect them to break is the one who holds the real power in the room. It's easy to lose control, to let emotions take over, to meet aggression with aggression. It's much harder to pause, to take a breath, and to let silence do the work for you. But that pause changes everything. It shifts the focus from reaction to reflection, from chaos to clarity. Another reason silence is so powerful is that it forces people to listen. When someone speaks and is met with anger, they instinctively go on the defensive. They stop hearing your words and start planning their next argument. But when they are met with silence, they are left only with their own thoughts. They have to sit in the discomfort of what they just said, to feel the emptiness of the space you created. And in that space, they start to process. They start to question. They start to feel the impact of their own words in a way that your anger never would have allowed them to. People don't forget silence. They expect words. They expect noise. But silence lingers. It stays with them long after the moment has passed. They replay it in their minds, trying to make sense of it, trying to understand what it meant. And in that process, they often come to conclusions they wouldn't have reached if you had simply reacted. That's why silence, when used intentionally, is not just an absence of words, it is a tool. It is a message in itself. Silence is also a way to maintain control, not just of the situation, but of yourself. The moment you react in anger, you give the other person power over your emotions. You let them dictate how you feel, how you respond, how you behave. But when you choose silence, you take that power back. You show them that they do not have control over you, that their words or actions do not shake you. And that in itself is a powerful statement. This is especially true in situations where someone is trying to provoke you. Maybe it's a coworker who undermines you, a friend who pushes your buttons, or even a stranger who is looking for an argument. If you react, you give them exactly what they wanted, confirmation that they can affect you. But if you remain silent, if you hold your ground without engaging, they are left with nothing to hold on to. Their tactics lose their effectiveness, and they are forced to reconsider how they approach you. Over time, they learn that their usual methods don't work, and they either change their behavior or walk away. Either way, you win. There is also an element of mystery in silence. People don't know what you're thinking, and that makes them uncomfortable. When someone lashes out and you don't react, their mind starts racing. Are you angry? Are you indifferent? Are you planning something they don't see coming? That uncertainty is often more unsettling than any words you could say. It makes them second-guess themselves, reconsider their actions, and sometimes even feel regret. Because without your reaction to guide them, they are left navigating the situation on their own. Silence isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about choosing how and when to express them. It's about knowing that not every battle is worth fighting, and that sometimes the most effective response is no response at all. It's about recognizing that the most powerful people aren't the ones who shout the loudest, they're the ones who don't need to. In a world that thrives on noise, on reactions, on instant responses, silence is a rarity. And because it is rare, it is impactful, it demands attention. It forces people to pay closer attention. It makes them uncomfortable in ways that words never could. And that discomfort leads to introspection, to change, to growth. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, take a moment. Instead of reacting, hold your ground. Let them sit with their own words. Let them feel the weight of their own behavior. Let silence do the work, because in that silence there is strength. In that silence there is control. And in that silence there is a lesson they will never forget. People are conditioned to expect certain responses in conflict. When they provoke, they anticipate a reaction, anger, frustration, or at the very least, defensiveness. It's a pattern ingrained in human interaction, and they know how to navigate it. But when you break that pattern, when you respond with silence instead of outrage, the entire dynamic shifts. Suddenly, they have no framework to work with. They are left alone with their words and actions, forced to confront themselves in a way they never expected. That silence becomes louder than any argument ever could, pressing on them, making them question, making them uncomfortable. And in that discomfort, the real lesson begins. Anger is predictable. It gives people an excuse, a way out. The moment you raise your voice, the conversation stops being about what they did and becomes about how you reacted. You become the distraction that lets them escape accountability. See, look how emotional you are. You're overreacting. It's a classic deflection tactic, and it works because human nature makes us want to defend ourselves. But silence robs them of that escape. It keeps the focus entirely on them. It forces them to sit in the weight of their own actions without a way to twist the narrative. They don't get to point fingers, shift blame, or justify their behavior. They are left with only themselves. And that can be an incredibly unsettling place to be. Silence also creates space for reflection, for realization, for self-awareness. When people are met with anger, they immediately go into defense mode. Their mind stops processing what they did and starts focusing on winning the argument. But when they are met with silence, they are left with no battle to fight. Instead, they are forced to fill in the gaps themselves. They begin replaying the interaction in their head, analyzing their words, questioning their actions. Why aren't they reacting? Did I go too far? Am I in the wrong? That internal dialogue is far more powerful than anything you could have said in anger. It allows them to arrive at their own conclusions, and those conclusions are far more lasting than anything imposed from the outside. In that silence, something else happens. Respect is earned. People instinctively admire those who can remain composed under pressure. It's easy to lash out. It's easy to meet fire with fire. But the ability to remain calm, to refuse to be dragged into the chaos, that is rare. And because it is rare, it commands attention. It sends an unspoken message that you are in control, not just of the situation, but of yourself. It tells the other person that they do not have the power to shake you, to dictate your emotions, to manipulate your response. And that is something they will remember long after the moment has passed. The power of silence extends beyond personal conflicts. It applies to leadership, negotiations, and even daily interactions. The best leaders, the most respected individuals, are often the ones who don't waste their words. They don't engage in unnecessary battles. They don't let their emotions dictate their actions. Instead, they know when to speak and, more importantly, when to stay silent. They understand that silence can command more attention than 1,000 spoken words. A well-timed pause, an unspoken response, a refusal to engage in pettiness, these are the things that set true leaders apart. There is also an element of psychological discomfort in silence. People don't like the unknown. When you respond with anger, they know where they stand. They know how to react. But when you respond with silence, their mind starts filling in the blanks. Are you angry? Are you indifferent? Are you planning something they can't see coming? That uncertainty is unsettling. It makes them second-guess themselves, question their choices, and sometimes even regret their actions before you ever say a word. That kind of psychological, logical impact is something that no amount of yelling can achieve. Silence is not avoidance. It is not weakness. It is a deliberate choice, a tool used with precision. There are moments when speaking up is necessary, but there are also moments when silence is the most powerful statement you can make. The key is knowing the difference, knowing when words will make an impact and when they will only fuel the fire. The strongest people aren't the ones who react to every provocation. They are the ones who choose their battles wisely, who know that sometimes the best way to win is by refusing to engage at all. This is especially true when dealing with people who thrive on conflict. Some individuals provoke simply for the sake of provoking. They feed off reactions, off the energy of an argument, off the drama that comes with conflict. To them, anger is a reward. It validates their actions. But when you deny them that reaction, when you take away their fuel, they are left with nothing. Their attempts to get under your skin fall flat. And over time, they realize that their tactics don't work on you. That realization forces them to either change their approach or leave you alone entirely. The long-term impact of silence is undeniable. People remember it. They remember the times they expected an argument but got nothing. They remember the times they tried to provoke a reaction and were met with unwavering calm. And more often than not, they come back later, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, with a different perspective. They begin to see the power in that moment, the lesson embedded in your lack of reaction. And that lesson sticks with them far longer than any angry words ever could. Silence also serves as a form of self-protection. When you engage in anger, you expend energy that could be used elsewhere. Energy that could be saved for the battles that truly matter. Not every situation deserves a response. Not every person is worth your emotional investment. Learning when to engage and when to walk away is one of the most valuable skills you can develop, because the reality is some people don't want to learn. Some people don't want resolution, they just want to fight. And the best way to deal with those people is not to fight at all. There is a saying that the most powerful person in the room is the one who needs to say the least. That's because true power doesn't come from volume, it comes from presence, it comes from self-control. It comes from the ability to choose your responses instead of letting others dictate them for you. And when you master that, you become someone who cannot be manipulated, cannot be provoked, cannot be controlled by external forces. So the next time someone pushes, take a breath. Resist the urge to react. Let them sit in their own words. Let them feel the weight of their actions. Let silence do the work, because in that silence there is wisdom. In that silence there is strength. And in that silence there is a lesson they will never forget. People expect reactions. They expect that when they push you hard enough, you will break, that when they provoke you, you will respond with anger, frustration, or defensiveness. It's human nature to want to fight back, to defend ourselves, to prove a point. But what happens when you don't? What happens when instead of reacting with emotion, you meet their aggression with silence? Suddenly they are left with nothing to feed off. They are forced to sit in the discomfort of their own words and actions without a counterattack to latch onto. And that silence, it can shatter them in ways that anger never could. When someone wrongs you, your first instinct is often to retaliate. It feels justified, necessary even, but anger is predictable. It gives the other person an excuse, a way out. The moment you react, they can shift the blame onto you. They can point to your anger, your reaction, and use it as a defense mechanism. Look at how you're acting, they'll say. See, you're the problem. Just like that, they escape accountability. But when you respond with silence, you deny them that opportunity. You leave them with no justification, no counter-argument, no way to twist the narrative. They are left with only their own behavior, forced to sit in the weight of what they have done. That is far more powerful than any words you could throw at them in the heat of the moment. Silence also forces reflection. When people engage in conflict, their minds often go into battle mode. They are not listening to understand, they are listening to respond. Their focus is not on self-awareness, but on winning. But when their aggression is met with silence, they are given nothing to fight against. There is no battle, no argument, no justification. And in that quiet space, something shifts. The mind begins to fill in the gaps, to question itself. Why aren't they reacting? Did I go too far? Am I the one who's wrong? This internal dialogue is what leads to true awareness, far more than any verbal confrontation ever could. Because when people arrive at their own realizations, those realizations stick. They become personal, undeniable, and lasting. Silence is also a demonstration of control. In a world where emotions often dictate behavior, the ability to remain composed is a rare and respected quality. It takes strength to hold your ground without reacting. It takes discipline to resist the urge to defend, to argue, to engage in unnecessary conflict. And that discipline commands attention. People admire those who can remain calm under pressure. It signals confidence, power, and self-mastery. It sends an unspoken message. You do not have control over me. My emotions are my own. This is something that lingers in people's minds long after the moment has passed. They remember your composure. They remember that they could not shake you. And that, in itself, is a lesson they will not forget. Beyond personal interactions, the power of silence extends into leadership, negotiations, and influence. The most respected leaders are often those who do not speak unless it is necessary. They do not waste words. They do not engage in petty battles. They understand that silence is not emptiness, it is presence. When they do speak, people listen because their words carry weight. And when they choose to remain silent, that silence carries even more meaning. It forces people to pay attention, to reflect, to reconsider. This is why in high-stakes negotiations, the person who can remain silent the longest often wins. Because silence creates pressure, it forces the other side to fill the void, to question, to rethink. It is a strategic tool used by the strongest and most intelligent minds throughout history. Silence also unsettles people in ways that anger never could. When you lash out at someone, they know how to react. They have a script for that situation, but when you say nothing, they are left in uncertainty. Their mind starts racing, trying to interpret your response or lack thereof. Are they angry? Are they planning something? Do they not care at all? That lack of clarity is more unnerving than any words you could say. It puts them in a position of discomfort, making them confront their own behavior rather than focusing on your reaction. And discomfort is what leads to growth. It forces people to examine themselves in ways they otherwise wouldn't. This isn't about passive aggression or avoidance. It's about intentional silence. There is a difference between ignoring a problem and strategically refusing to engage. The key is knowing when silence is the right response, when speaking will only escalate the situation, and when silence will lead to greater impact. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every person deserves your emotional energy. Learning to discern which situations require your voice and which require your silence is a skill that can change the way you navigate the world. It is not weakness, it is wisdom. Silence also protects your peace. When you engage in anger, you carry that energy with you. It lingers long after the argument is over. It drains you, weighs on you, disrupts your focus. But when you choose silence, you choose not to take on that burden. You choose to keep your mind clear, your emotions balanced, your energy intact. You recognize that not every situation deserves a reaction, and that your peace is more valuable than proving a point. Over time, this mindset creates a sense of inner strength, a confidence that comes from knowing you are in control of yourself, no matter what others do. And here's the thing, people remember silence. They remember the times they expected an argument but got nothing. They remember the moments when they tried to provoke you only to be met with calm composure. And in that memory, a shift occurs. They begin to see you differently, not as someone who is easily manipulated, not as someone who can be drawn into meaningless battles, but as someone who operates on a different level. Someone who cannot be controlled, who cannot be provoked, who cannot be broken by mere words. So the next time someone tries to pull you into their storm, pause. Take a breath. Choose your response wisely. Let them sit in their own words. Let them feel the weight of their own actions. Let silence do the work, because in that silence there is wisdom. In that silence there is strength. And in that silence there is a lesson they will never forget.